Hey everybody, today we're going to talk a little bit about propagation. Propagation is where you take a plant that you really like and you make a whole bunch more of it. So let's say you come across a currant that tastes delicious and you're like, I want to make a ton of these currant bushes. We're going to go through that today. There's a lot of different types of propagation and each one has its purpose. So the first form that we're going to talk about is root division. When you have something like a decorative grass, actually decorative grasses are the perfect example for this because they get bigger and more mature, the inside actually starts to die out a little bit. So it's actually very healthy to divide that clump into smaller clumps and then spread them out. So some things you do great with root division. Hostas do great with this. Sedum does great with this. There's a bunch of things in your landscape. You'll notice that they just get bigger and bigger and bigger at the base. Bee balm does great at just taking some roots, a clump out and moving it somewhere else. The second form is by seed. The reason you would do that is in some cases, like looking at this coneflower behind me, this coneflower doesn't get a huge root base at the bottom, but it's got a ton of growth at the top. I mean, it does all right, but what you get a lot of is seed. And the seed will actually mature quickly. Within two years, you're gonna have flowers on top of that thing. So if you just harvest the seeds, that's the most efficient way of spreading your coneflower. Other things like a sunflower, right? The whole plant dies and it relies on the seeds to actually continue to grow and spread. So a lot of wildflowers, a lot of fruits and vegetables, you're going to use the seeds, and that's what you're going to do to propagate it, to create more. However, there's a third camp. And that third camp is something that you're not going to be able to divide the roots out because, well, an apple tree, right? Or a hydrangea bush. You don't have a ton of growth all coming out, going outward. It's one central trunk, right? You're also not going to do seed because for an apple tree, like you try a great apple and you plant that seed will not be true to the apple that it came from. It's a genetic mix of whatever the bee visited before that flower. So you want to clone that exact same type of plant with the same type of blooms or the same tasting fruit. So you've got to take a cutting. So you're going to take a cutting, which is a piece of branch off the plant. Now in an apple tree's situation, that's a little different. You're not going to necessarily root that cutting. What you're going to do is you're going to graft it onto rootstock. So you got a healthy tree that's growing in the ground that's bred specifically for healthy roots that can grow in a variety of different situations, or that can keep the plant relatively small. That's where the dwarf and semi-dwarf come from. It's like trying to drink out of a coffee straw. You're not going to get a lot of nutrients. Same thing if you take a tree that wants to be 40, 50 feet tall and put it on a coffee straw or a smaller, very hardy rootstock. It's going to keep it to be a dwarf or a semi-dwarf size tree. So you're going to take that tree root, you're going to cut the top growth off, and they will graft on the branch from their Honeycrisps. So the bottom will keep it small and healthy. The top will grow the type of fruit you want. That's a direct clone of where it came from, its parent, and it will give the exact fruit that you wanted. And it's mature. It's mature wood. That wood probably already has fruit, might even have fruit spurs on it already. And you'll get fruit within the first 2 to 3 years. Where if you planted a seed, number one, it'll take forever to grow. Number two, you don't know what you're actually gonna get. And number three, it'll take forever to produce fruit, 5 to 7 years. So what we'll do in a cutting standpoint when it comes to bushes and shrubs, which is what we're gonna talk about today, is we're gonna root those cuttings. We're not gonna talk about grafting today, but if you've got things like grapevines, and you've got things like currants, and you've got things like hydrangeas and elderberry, and there's a ton of plants that do well with this. And you're going to want to you're going to cut a branch off, and you want to root that. And the purpose for that is you can get a direct clone, it's mature wood, and you can spread out and get a ton of plants really quickly. There's a few different types of wood. One of them is a hardwood cutting, which is like this. It's an evergreen. Those you tend to take when they're dormant or in the winter. The challenge there is they take a lot longer to root, but the benefit is you can do them when everything else is sleeping or dead outside, which is really cool. You can keep gardening throughout the winter. They take a little bit longer. These are probably going to be about 2 to 3 months before you start seeing roots come out of them. Where something like a semi-hardwood, which is right here, it's getting a little firmer on the bottom, but it's not softwood, which is here on the top. It's all flexible. This is starting to firm up. It's starting to get a little brown. Semi-hardwood would be taken middle of the summer. And this one will root in 2 to 3 weeks, not 2 to 3 months, 2 to 3 weeks. So the risk of rot is a lot lower. And what you would do is you'd take something like this grapevine. This one's a tad long for me, so I'd cut the top off. You're gonna wanna cut it at the base, right below a leaf node, because that is where all the cells are going to divide quickly and try to decide what they want to be in life. I guess that's the journey for many of us, trying to decide what we want to be in life. That's what those spots are trying to do. And you want those to be under the soil or under the water. Then above the water or above the soil, you want to reduce they call it transpiration, which is just the evaporation of water out of the leaves. So the leaves, the plant will suck water up, and then the leaves will actually transpire the water. So you want to reduce your sheer amount of leaves on the top to about that. Now you get two good things. One of them is less transpiration or evaporation of the water, and the second is you still get photosynthesis sending energy to the root growth on the bottom. So this is great. Now we plant it right about there in the soil. You could even go one further. I'll even cut that off. I cut the leaf and the growth node off, and then put it in right there. And you'll still have 1, 2, 3 spots to grow branches out. You don't need a lot for a grapevine because you're only going to grow about 2 vines up, where for a hydrangea or some type of shrub, you want a lot of little nodes there because you want it to look bushy on the bottom. This is a semi-hardwood cutting, perfect, ready to go in the water or dirt. And this would be a softwood cutting. This is from a honeysuckle. And so there are some plants that do better being rooted as a softwood, kind of floppy cutting. In all cases, when you take your cutting, you want to put them in water right away to keep them as moist as you can until you're ready to put them in your propagation system. Now, there's a couple different ways you could do this. One, you could just put them in a glass of water. If you do that, just make sure to change the water regularly because it keeps the water fresh, keeps it oxygenated, and that way you get less rot, disease, and it'll have better success. Second is just putting it right in potting soil. We do that when we do dahlias. We'll take hundreds of cuttings, softwood cuttings, straight off of the tuber, and we'll put it in like a 72 count tray of sterile potting soil. It's all moist. Then we'll put a cover over it, set it on a heat mat to 71 degrees and wait. And within 2 weeks, they're all rooted. I mean, 99% of them are rooted. In this type of system, it's not dirt and it's not a glass of water, but this is actually called the Clone King. It's one of my favorite purchases that we made. If you enjoy propagating, I recommend getting something like this. But what it does is there's water about up to here, and then there's like a little sprinkler system that's just spraying up, and then the cutting is sitting like this, and so the base isn't all the way in the water, but it's getting sprayed constantly. And the reason that's so effective is because it's staying moist, it's staying dark, and it's got access to tons of oxygen, and they root really well. So within 2 to 3 weeks, these will all be rooted, and then you can pot them up from there. So these in here they were all softwood cuttings taken in July. They're all from a few pink champagne currants that we have that we really like. These are actually gonna be selling next year. So we're preparing them now. They're about a little over a month in here. I actually would have taken them out about a week or 2 ago, but we just got busy. So if you wanna see what the roots look like, which I'm sure you do, I would wanna see, this is what it looks like after about, a month, a little over a month. And these are semi-hardwood cuttings. These are hardwood, there'd be no way that they would have this much roots on them. But because they're actively growing right now, they're really pushing a lot of energy into that root system. And there you have it. So then the next thing we would do, after we've rooted our cuttings, let's take one out, is you take this cutting, and you can see here a manifestation of exactly what we talked about. Look at where the roots are coming out of. They're coming out of right down here where the leaf axis was, and then they skip a little bit, and then they start coming out where the next leaf axis was, and they skip a little bit, and now you can even see some roots coming out of that next leaf axis. So those are gonna be your most popular spots in the plant to grow roots. Now you're gonna take that, you're gonna put it into a pot. For us, we'll put it into this size pot because this is great for them to go dormant in. And then next year we'll pot them up into a 1 gallon or bigger. Once we grow them out for 3 months or so before sale, they'll bush out nicely and they'll look beautiful and they'll be healthy. I add a little bit of, this is called mycorrhizal fungi. Fungi is manifested in mushrooms. They're a sign of a really good healthy forest floor. You wanna have good bacteria and good fungi in your floor of your forest or your garden or your landscape. And what mycorrhizal fungi does is it actually attaches to the roots, sends out hundreds of fibers to grab nutrients and bring it back to the root. And what it gets in return for that service is the plant will give it sugars. And so it's a really cool symbiotic relationship. In a forest, almost the entire forest floor is connected by mycorrhizal fungi. And that's why it can sustain itself against drought, against heat, against cold, against whatever is gonna hit it. it's got a lot stronger, more mature of a base. It literally increases the size of the roots on a plant by 300 times. So it's substantial. And so in a sterile pot like this, we like to add it so that there's something going on in there. And then when you plant it in your soil, it really takes off, and it's good against any type of transplant shock. Then we're gonna finish filling up this pot. Let me show you the dirt we have, just because it shows a few principles of potting soil. So here's some of the dirt we have here. You can kind of see in there, you can see some pine bark. We use pine bark because that allows for better drainage and it adds nutrients to the soil over time. You can also see some sand in there that helps with drainage. You could either use coco coir or peat moss. Either one of those holds moisture. And then there's some other amendments in here, but basically this is just to keep it moist and to keep it from getting too soggy and waterlogged. So we're gonna take that and put them in the pot. We'll fill the pot. You basically wanna fill it to about this far, gently pack it down, and that way when you're watering it, the water can fill up the pot and then slowly go down. And that's if you fill it all the way, it's really annoying to water, because whenever you water it, the water just goes over the edge and you gotta sit there forever until you finally watered it deep. So always leave about 1.5 inches or an inch on the top so that the water can pool up and then drain down and pool up and drain down. You can also put some fertilizer on there and so on. So I hope that helps with propagation. Go out there and try it. It's super fun. I have really enjoyed this because I could keep it in my basement. What I do is I have a little grow light in the basement that's on a timer, and I put this underneath that. And you can go out then any time of the year and try different things. And the other cool thing is you get to pick it up and look at the roots in there, which is really cool. But if you're doing it en masse, then you're gonna wanna do it either in the ground if you've got a mister or in a nice tray. But either way, go out there and have fun. Try propagating. Trust me, it's not as complicated as it looks. I haven't been doing this for very long, probably 3-4 years, and I've learned a lot in that short period of time, and I absolutely love it. There's always things to learn. A failure is not a failure. It's just an experiment. It's you learning. So good luck. Get out there, enjoy your gardening, and come back and see what we have next time. Thanks a lot.